in pretrial detention. He hadn't been charged with a crime yet, and he spent 5 days in a jail cell eaten alive by bugs, and he hadn't even been charged, and he died from being eaten by bugs right outside of where they're building Cop City. Don Ziegler's been reporting on this. And then there was also in Kansas City, Missouri, there was a 16-year-old boy who is like a really talented musician, like a really sweet kid, apparently, like scholarly. He went to pick up his twin brother at his friend's house and knocked on the wrong door, and the person answered with a shot to the head. And the person's he was released from custody, and I have the contact for the prosecutor, so I'll find the contacts for those. But I know the gentleman in Atlanta has been Don Ziegler's been reporting on that, so I'll find some links. So I'm sure we'll want to bring that up. I saw Vinny just.
Yeah, Vinny came and Norman's here as well, and we're already recording, so it'd be really great if we got going. And Wendy, absolutely great job digging up these horrible stories.
Well, that one I saw on Fox.
Oh my God!
Thankfully, the boy is living though. The boy actually was in the hospital for 3 days.
And Dorothy and everybody else, we'll get to questions once we start the show, but we're kind of staggering and stumbling into the show, and it'd be great if we could get going as soon as we could.
Okay, we rocking and rolling here?
Yes, indeed.
All right. Hey, everybody, this is Harvey Sluggo Wasserman, back for the 133rd Green Grassroots Emergency Election Protection Coalition Zoom call. We are going to be packed to the gills today, as always. I want to welcome my listeners at the Progressive Radio Network, the Solartopia Green Power and Wellness Show. In the first hour, we're going to start with the grassroots organizing genius of Andrea Miller, and preceded briefly by Andy Moore of the NANR, who's going to tell us exactly what that is, and the great Norm Stockwell from progressive.org, who still gets the prize for best beard on our shows. You still look like a lumberjack, bro, and I'm glad to have you with us. Then we are, after the half hour, we're going to be joined by Anna Georgi, who has just been in Germany, and she is going to tell us in English about the spectacular victory. And it is impossible to overstate the importance of this victory with the shutdown of the final nuclear reactors in Germany. Germany is, I was challenged on this. I've been saying that Germany is the fourth largest economy in the world. And on a Greenpeace call yesterday, someone told me it's now the fifth largest economy in the world, and that California is the fourth largest economy in the world. So we won't dispute it, but nonetheless, Germany is definitely the biggest economy in Europe, and they are now done with nuclear power. And Anna Georgi, who's played a major role in the no nukes movement for many, many years, is going to tell us all about that. We'll go to the top of the hour, and we will be joined by the legendary Stephen Donziger for a full hour to discuss the insane prosecution that he has endured at the hands of Chevron. And it's an incredible story. And we're giving him the whole second hour. He will be joined by folks from the Free Julian Assange movement and others. So it is action-packed. We will go to 7 o'clock Eastern time, and then probably beyond for general kibitzing. We already have 66 people on the call. For those of you who have joined anticipating Stephen Donziger, again, he will be on at 6 o'clock Eastern time, about an hour from now. And we are going to start with grassroots organizing. We want to go to Andy Moore, because we know Andy has to pick up his kids at daycare. Andy, and then we'll segue directly into Andrea Miller and Norm Stockwell for the update. And Andrea's going to give us a big picture view of grassroots organizing leading into 2024, and Norm is going to update us on what's actually happening in Wisconsin. Andy Moore, come on with us. Tell us about your organization, what you do, and who you are. We know you're in Oklahoma. Beyond that, tell us what your organization is about, and please put the links in the chat.
Sure. Thanks so much, Harvey. Thanks for having me. It's great to be with all of you today on this lovely Monday here. So I'm with the National Association of Nonpartisan Reformers, which is a mouthful. We like to call it NANNER, which sounds fun and tasty, as electoral and democracy reform should be. We're a nationwide organization. I happen to live in Oklahoma City, which is really right in the middle of the country. But our work is nationwide. We have nearly 100 members who are working on what we call democracy reform, building a stronger, more resilient, more representative and fair democracy across the country. So issues like independent redistricting, trying to push back on gerrymandering, open primaries, alternate voting systems like ranked choice voting or approval voting, campaign finance reform, those kinds of issues. And we're really excited, and we've seen some really great success recently in places like Alaska and Maine, a bunch of cities in Utah. And we're really looking forward to 2024, where I think we're going to see really explosive growth of the electoral reform system across the country. I mean, in states, big notable ones like Nevada, small ones that don't get as much press, because voters across the country, I think, recognize that the current two-party duopoly is just not working for us anymore. We as Americans are more divided, arguably, than we've been, in 150 years. And the solution to that is to give some of the power back to the people, reform systems so that they work for voters, not just for politicians, and empower us, I think, as just Americans, to elect representatives who are going to truly work for us and not just be beholden to their biggest donors, their special interests.
Okay, so I think, as we all know, a doo-wop was a much better type of music than it is for a political system. And we hope that you'll put your, we know you got to run, so would you please put your platform in the chat in one form or another, or at least put your website. Send me your email at solartopia@me, and we will add you to our list, and we'll have you join back on. You need to be in touch with Andrea Miller and with Norm Stockwell, and to further your great work. We have 73 people with us. Does anyone want to ask Andy a quick question before we proceed? Are you a 501c3? Are you a nonprofit? Do you do 501c4 work?
Yeah, so we're a 501c4. Enables us. I mean, when you're working with a two-party duopoly, you kind of have to fight fire with fire sometimes. So that maximizes our ability to advocate for reforms like the ones that our members are working on.
Oh, wonderful. Okay. Is there anything else you want to tell us?
I'm open to some questions. I've got some time if people want to ask questions. I see several hands raised.
Okay, Scott Denman, you're raising your hand. Are you unmuted? Can we unmute Scott, please? Scott Denman, you go.
Thank you very much, Andy and Harv. Thank you both. Andy, what kind of a base do you have? Do you have a membership? If so, how large is it? How many operating chapters do you have in the states? I'm from Maine, where we have ranked voting, and it's already worked fabulously to get rid of a corporate fascist congressman and to put in a moderate Democrat. But it's a tremendous tool, for one. But I'm very curious because obviously, definitely supportive of all of your goals and objectives, and hoping that you have a great groundswell behind you.
Yeah, so that's a great question, Scott. Thank you. So right now, I think from the email I saw last night, we have 97 active members, and members are organizations, not individuals. Okay. We're really kind of a business to business operation where we are trying to help organizations grow, right? Trying to increase the capacity of organizations, big and small. So we do have, members that are large national organizations like Unite America, Represent Us, Fair Vote, Open Primaries, some of those big ones. But we also, work closely with a number of smaller state-based or even local organizations, folks that are trying to make change in their backyard, right? We all know that all politics is local, and being able to connect with grassroots folks around the country, including those who may be are working on
Monday,
stuff
right?
on their own, but getting them connected to, maybe a larger organization in their state. If there's a campaign that's going on, we try to help kind of bridge the gap there and really help those smaller grassroots groups kind of level up so that they can be more effective and can be part of this budding movement across the country. Oh, Harvey, I think you're muted.
There we go. Okay, so yes, it sounds great. Do you have Center for Common Ground on your roster there?
I'll have to go back and look. I'll be honest, we had explosive growth last year. We went from about 25 to more than 90 members, and I've lost track of who's all on there. Membership is open to any organization. There's a first year free option. We do a really great annual conference. It's going to be next February of 2024 in Denver, and we'd love to see all of you there.
Okay, Andrea, do you want to? Oh God, we got a bunch of hands here. John Steiner, go ahead. John Steiner, you're muted. Can we unmute John Steiner? Ron,
I'm unmuted.
Okay, go for it.
Andy, great to see you in this venue.
Go ahead.
Am I good?
Yeah, you're good.
And you alluded to this, but if somebody on the call wants to join or just learn more, we presume on the website there's an easy way to do that, or what would you tell us as any organizations that are on the call to want to get more involved?
Yeah, that's right, Tron. Always good to see you. I put our link in the chat, and I'll do it here and again in just a moment. It's nonpartisanreformers.org. If you want to see who our current members are, you can click on membership. There's a list of all of our members and most of their logos if they submitted one. And you're welcome to join. There's a link to join right there on the website as well.
Well, listen, thank you, John. I would suggest that your Denver meeting next February, that you feature Andrea Miller and the Center for Common Ground so that you can present the core issues with grassroots organizing and how the Georgia Miracle was run and things like that. Can we unmute Ron Leonard? Ruth Strauss, go ahead. And also Point Man needs to be unmuted. And then we're going to give you 5 more minutes, and then we're going to switch over to Andrea Miller and then Norm Stockwell for the Wisconsin reports, okay?
Sluggo, just 2 quick reminders. For people asking questions, we have the 90-second rule.
Right.
So people can get in and out of their questions really quickly, and we can get to everybody. And number 2, if you're unmuted, please be quiet. Don't ask what day it is. We heard somebody shouting out. You're going out on a live line, and just try to keep quiet unless you're recognized. Thanks.
Thank you, Mike. And whoever asked that, it's Monday. Go ahead, Ruth, and then Ron Leonard. And then
you had me. It wasn't me.
Ruth?
It wasn't me wrestling paper.
Somebody's
anyway, I didn't know what people said about Andrea Miller. I think you've got 2 people open. I'm sorry. Can you hear me?
Yeah, go for it, Ruth.
Okay. So anyway, I think Andrea was probably in large part responsible for the winning of Judy Protasiewicz in Wisconsin. So I definitely want you to get together with her. What I want to know is, do you all have a plan? I mean, it's great to have more parties, but the real boogaboo is the state legislators that want their, electors to vote however they want, or the state legislature to override the electors. So are you all working on that as well?
Yeah, that's a great question, Ruth. So we, as an organization, we don't champion any specific policy, or we really kind of work as a trade association for our members. But I'll say, I think, we share some common values. And one of those key things is that we're not anti-party, we're pro-voter, right? So we're all working on issues that make democracy work better for all of us. There's some great research and commentary from folks like Lee Trutman about the two-party doom loop and how America might be better served by having multiple parties that are stronger and better represent their constituents. And I think one of the things that we're looking at is not just Congress, right, but definitely down the ballot, whether it's state legislatures, your county government, your city government, but designing election systems that work better for voters. As one small example, here where I live in Oklahoma, like many places in the country, our city elections are nonpartisan. Our mayor and city council, they're on the ballot, and it's an open primary. Everybody gets to vote because the race itself is nonpartisan. But when you go up the ballot some to county and state government, all of those partisan races have partisan primaries, and that means that in a state like Oklahoma, all of the Democrats and all of the independent voters don't get a say in any of the races that are often defining who wins, right? Last cycle, 70% of the state legislature in Oklahoma was reelected by default because they didn't have opponents or because they ran in a race that was a single party primary election. And that meant that the majority of voters didn't get a chance to cast a ballot whatsoever. And so we, looking at how we can change reforms like that so that everyone's vote really does count equal and that we all get a say in who elects us or who represents us, I think are fundamental things that do trickle down or trickle up in many cases to elect better candidates that pay attention to what voters actually want and not just what the folks at the fringes are yelling about.
Okay, so your website is posted in the chat and people can look at that specifically. Ron Leonard, I don't know why you're muted again. Let's get you unmuted. We're gonna cut it off quickly, but Ron, go ahead, and Wendy, Charles, and Justin, and that'll be it. Go ahead, Wendy. Ron.
Yes, so I'm so glad that you're optimistic, and I'm curious as to where the optimism comes from. Is it because that we are seeing in a recent Gallup poll that 49% of Americans recognize themselves as an independent rather than a Republican or Democrat? For example, in 2004, it was basically 35% Democrat, 33% Republican, and 31% independent. Now it's 49% independent. What's happening?
Yeah, that's a great question, Ron. And I'll be honest, I'm one of those folks, right? I was a Republican for the first 10 years of my voting life, switched to be a Democrat with Hope and Change in 2008. And then several years ago, left the Democratic Party as well, because I felt like neither party really was doing a good job of representing me, at least here and where I live. And I think we see that across the country. I mean, many states, Colorado, Nevada, there's lots of states where independents are a majority of voters. And in states that have close primaries, that means that a majority of voters cannot participate in those primary elections. Often those are the general elections, right? If there's no opponent. But furthermore, I think a concern is that if the two parties are losing voters, right? People are leaving those parties, both opting out and choosing to not affiliate with any party. If you're selling, widgets or tennis shoes and an increasing number of people don't want what you're selling, you really got to look at yourself in the mirror and examine why that is. And so I think, we see some really exciting possibilities on the horizon. Groups like Forward Party that are starting another party, but they are making election reform part of their platform. In some ways, harkens back to the way that our two major parties used to function, where it wasn't just ideological divides on both sides, but where you have cross-cutting issues, where you have conservative and liberal members of both parties. I think Americans are starting to organize around issues and around personalities and people, not just around political ideology. And I think everyone, those of us in this movement, anyone who cares about the future of our country, should take notice and start to really think about what that means for how we structure our elections to make sure that how we handle that is keeping pace with where voters are.
Okay, so Annie, it's great. We're going to have you back because we're really packed today. If you folks put your hands up, if you don't mind. It's 5:20. Andy, I know you had childcare responsibilities, and we want to hear more in detail. If you'll come back in a couple of weeks, we will feature you, give you a full segment. You can put up a screen share of what your organization stands for, and we can move for that. Okay, is that all right?
That sounds great. Yeah, I appreciate it. I appreciate your time today, Harvey, and everybody else.
I know you want to jump in, but Andy's got to go and we got to move on. Is there something you can say in like 5 seconds?
Absolutely. So the big deal about fighting fire with fire is that fire actually denies the growth of the spread of the flames. And so the big thing that's important here is multinational corporate money out, voters in. And there's a bill in Seattle that has already gone through. That's something that can happen nationwide. But I think that's the core of how to actually have people momentum instead of corporate momentum.
Okay, thank you for that. Justin, Andy Moore, thank you. We'll have you back in a couple of weeks. Check with Wendy. We'll schedule you in. Okay. And I hope you can stay now and listen to Andrea Miller. We have 88 people with us. Andrea, we want to talk about Wisconsin, then we'll go to Norm Stockwell. You have 3 events coming up. We want to again thank you for your great work in Wisconsin and give us a template in conjunction with organizations like Andy's for moving into 2024 with grassroots organizing. And do that all in 10 seconds. No, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Well, I am going to be really, really quick, Harvey. So
But it's
Harvey
okay.
and crew, thank you so very much for having me. Yes, we did work in Wisconsin, and we specifically worked with Black and Hispanic voters in Milwaukee. Ed Spindell, a Republican election official, said in 2022 that they were successful because he managed to disenfranchise 37,000 Black and brown voters in Milwaukee. So when we went into Milwaukee, and Mandela Barnes lost that race by 22,000 votes, when we went into Milwaukee, we understood that the voter turnout, the Democratic voter turnout in Milwaukee needed to be 70% or more. And we were so delighted to see, literally immediately after the first hour, that Milwaukee was at 70% voter turnout, and it ended the night at 73%. And what that told us is our Black and Hispanic voters had actually come out to vote. Now, there are 238,000 registered voters of color in Wisconsin, out of nearly 3 million voters. So it's a very small percentage. We were really, really pleased to see that 138,000 of those voters lived literally in one city county, and that was Milwaukee. So that made our job easy. One of the things that we do when we are turning out BIPOC voters is, number one, we make sure they know when they can vote, where they can vote, and whenever possible, we give them a ride. We had a number of people, when they called our Souls to the Polls for free rides, say, thank you so very much, because if I hadn't been able to get a ride, I wouldn't have been able to go and vote. So I cannot stress the importance of making sure that when we are looking at elections, we do not forget how are our more vulnerable voters going to get there. Our seniors and our low-income voters, especially those voters in areas of the city, counties, wherever, where there is limited to no public transportation. So that is always one of the first things we look at. How are we going to resolve the issue? And we make certain that we can explain what the voting rules are for voters, because in many instances, we may be turning out voters that have skipped the past 2 elections, some the past 3. So they may not be aware of the new rules, such as one of the rules in Wisconsin was, if you vote by mail, you can only drop off your ballot. You cannot drop off the ballot of a friend or a family member. And we had a number of voters who said, well, but, I got a relative who is bedridden. And we were able to say, we've given you the number for your registrar. Call that registrar. Give the registrar your name of the voter, and make sure they understand you will be dropping off 2 ballots. You don't want to get there and have them refuse the ballot. So clear that ahead of time. And people really appreciated that.
So your strategy is you've worked with, in Wisconsin, you work with Souls to the Polls.
Yes.
You have them on there. And if you have a connection to Mandela Barnes, we'd like to have him on the call. I think
Mandela Barnes will be joining us on Thursday, May 11th, to talk about his new Bridging the Gap Act, which exists to really help minority, women, rural, LGBTQIA candidates, all the candidates that the political parties seem to not care about and refuse to fund when they are running for elections.
Right. So if you put you have 3 events coming up, you want to put them in the chat. Tell us quickly. And this is our plan for 2024, 2 parts.
Well, and then let me share my screen for just a moment, because Virginia has a primary coming up on June 20th. And so we are getting ready for Virginia. So what you need to know about Virginia in 2023 is, as goes Virginia, as goes or will go the nation. We are running our first races in our new districts, and redistricting in Virginia was fair-ish, but brutal. We ended up with 37 Republican districts, or likely Republican, 31 likely Democratic districts, and 32 districts that are brand new. These districts literally could go either way. So Virginia is going to be a fight. The entire legislature, all 140 seats, are going to be up for election. And we also have more than 25 incumbents who decided they weren't going to run for re-election. Many of them because they were in a district less favorable to their party, but a number because they were going to have to run against a fellow incumbent. Now, very similar to Wisconsin, in Virginia, what we are fighting for is a reproductive freedom constitutional amendment. And our current governor has set all the wins we had on restoration of voting rights for returning citizens on its head. Postcard addresses will be available on April 21st. Phone banks for Virginia will open on April 21st. Texting begins on May 1st. In Virginia, we have 45 days of early voting, so we start voting on May 5th. So I'm going to quickly scroll through these slides. All right, I'll go to these. We have got 3 primary races that we're starting with. SD18, Chesapeake Portsmouth, 2 Black incumbents forced to run against each other. The woman is the president pro tem of the Senate, and should we win the day, would be the first African-American, the first woman to chair Senate Finance and Appropriation. Lionel is running as a spoiler. Senate District 13, Joe Morris is the incumbent. He is Virginia's favorite. It's been corrected. He's not Virginia's favorite pedophile. He is Virginia's favorite statutory rapist. So the Senate Democratic women all got together and endorsed La Cherise Aird. The Democratic Party still gave money to Joe, but whatever. So what we are doing this year, which is very different than all previous years, I am president of National Women's Political Caucus, and in these primaries, we are going to need to go in deep. We are going to need to go in hard. So while the C3 will be very involved in the primaries, we are pulling out the 501c4 to be able to dig in deep on those races. So events on April 30th at 6 p.m. There will be a special rally for Virginia, and we're calling it the Road to Richmond. All the candidates have confirmed, as has Jen McClellan. They will be talking about Virginia, its importance, and their race. And I will drop links in the chat. I'm going to scroll through this really, really fast. Here's the next one you're going to want to know about. Mandela Barnes will join us on May 11th. That'll be a Thursday night to talk about his new PAC, The Long Run, designed to provide assistance for women, minority candidates, rural candidates, LGBTQIA candidates, again, all the candidates that the Democratic Party doesn't seem to want. And then finally, on May 18th, restoring the right to vote in Virginia. We will be assembling a panel of impacted people working on the constitutional amendment. And I'm working on getting one of the attorneys that has filed a lawsuit because Virginia has its own version of the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act. And the governor's maybe I don't feel like restoring anybody, and his non-policy for restoration of voting rights violates what we believe it violates, the Virginia Voters' Bill of Rights. So I'm going to stop there and start dropping links in the chat. Please, please join us.
Fantastic, fantastic, Andrea. We're going to continue. Don't leave us. You had an enormous impact in Wisconsin. We have our resident lumberjack, Norm Stockwell, on the line to fill us in on what's going on in Wisconsin in the wake of our the incredible victory there from progressive.org. Norm, can you give us a report on what's going on in Wisconsin?
Yeah, thank you very much. It was a very a strong showing for Judge Janet Protasiewicz. Again, ostensibly a nonpartisan race, but there's no question that Dan Kelly, the opponent, was getting mostly funding from Republican dark money groups, and Janet Protasiewicz was getting money from pro-Democratic Party groups. So that's it's pretty clear. But the vote totals were very surprising. It was a very strong turnout for basically an off-year race. In fact, they had scheduled this in part assuming that it would be a low turnout race, and the numbers were very high. The numbers of young voters, the numbers of voters coming out in Milwaukee, thanks to Andrea and others, was very strong. But the other thing that's really interesting is we saw a lot of switchover in some of the traditional Republican strongholds. We have these counties in Wisconsin, these 3 counties outside of Milwaukee. They call them the WOW counties, which stands for Waukesha, Ozaukee, and Washington. And we saw quite a move in those counties away from the traditional strong Republican stalker voting bloc that was pretty solidly established in Waukesha. Also, the counties farther upstate, we had Tom Nelson with us a couple of weeks ago from Outagamie County, and those counties are called the BOW counties, which stands for Brown, Outagamie, and Winnebago, and those also came out very strongly for Judge Protasiewicz, and I think that there's no question that Dane County and Milwaukee County made the difference in this race because they had the strongest percentages. I think Madison, the Protasiewicz vote was something like 82% to 18% for Kelly for the county vote, and in Milwaukee County it was like 73 to 27%. So very strong showing in both of those urban areas. But she picked up a lot of support in the western part of the state, growing in the areas where the Democratic vote needs to grow in the months to come between now and 2024, and also growth in these traditionally Republican areas like the WOW counties. And so those are very important gains as we're looking forward. Also, if you look at the sheer numbers, Protasewicz had something like 200,000 plus votes more than Kelly. And so that's, a very strong showing. And you compare that to Joe Biden's 2020 victory over Donald Trump in Wisconsin, which was something like 25,000 votes or less. So less than 25,000 votes. So, that's an 8-time advantage there. It was also much stronger than the statewide Democratic spread in the 2022 election. So, definitely a linear progression moving upward there on the vote differences. However, Wisconsin is a very divided state. It's the state of Fighting Bob LaFollette, the founder of our magazine, and it's also the state of Joseph McCarthy. And we see that play out regularly in elections, and we saw it here as well. Judge Janet Protasewicz won a resounding victory, which secured the state Supreme Court. But in the state Senate, the Republicans gained their supermajority, which allows them, among other things, it gives them the powers of impeachment. And so there is some discussion now. The Wisconsin law allows the state legislature to impeach any civil officer. They don't really define what that means, civil officer, but the candidate who won the state Senate, a guy named Dan Knodel, said during the campaign that the first thing he would do is impeach Judge Janet Protasewicz. And so, we kind of know where their thinking is on this. Now, just a couple of days ago, the Senate Majority Leader, a guy named Devin LeMahieu, said that they would not be planning to do any impeachments, that they would not be using that power. But that's what he said to the media a couple days ago, and we'll see how the year plays out. The issue of impeachments is an interesting one, because more than anything else, what it could do is tie things up and bog things down. The Supreme Court Justice Janet Protasewicz will be seated August 1st. And we know that almost immediately, a progressive group here in Wisconsin called Law Forward is going to be introducing a suit trying to overturn the gerrymandered maps, which will make a huge difference for the 2024 elections should that go through. And so any kind of actions that will slow that process down, when you're looking at only the period between August of 2023 and we start having primaries in the early spring of 2024. So it's a pretty short agenda there. And so I think that anything that slows that down could be deemed problematical. So we have to keep an eye on that. And one thing that has been pointed out is the governor has the power to appoint someone. So if a Supreme Court justice were impeached, the governor could appoint a new Supreme Court justice. And in fact, that's how Dan Kelly, the candidate who just lost, had gotten his seat on the Supreme Court back in 2016, was he was appointed by then Governor Scott Walker. And so, we can see that back and forth happening, but I think that anything like that will mean delays and distractions from an agenda right now, which looks like, very strongly geared towards revisiting the gerrymandered districts and also overturning or eliminating the state's 1849 anti-abortion law. Those are the things that voters were most concerned about in this election. And those are the things that I think we should expect to see happening most quickly after Judge Protasewicz is seated in August of this year.
So we want to point out, thank you, Norm. First of all, Norm is the publisher of the Progressive Magazine, one of the great, and now progressive.org, is one of the great institutions of progressive thought and action in this country. It's a great honor to have you with us, Norm, and to represent. We also have, I want to mention, Dennis Bernstein is with us, the host of KPFK's, Berkeley's Flashpoints. Great to have you with us. The great Joel Siegel is with us from the homeless organizations he's working with, is tremendous, and a co-founder of these calls. Carl Grossman of the No Nukes movement on Long Island. Great to have you, Carl. Ann Wilcox is with us. Alyssa Matras, Tatanka Bricka, great from Romero. We have a really all-star group here. We have 95 people on the call, for God's sakes. One of the things that important to note before we go to the nuclear issue and Anna Georgi is you mentioned the gerrymandering. If the Supreme Court of Wisconsin overturns the current terribly gerrymandered maps, that will involve at least 2 congressional seats, because Wisconsin now has 8 congressional seats, 6 Republicans, which is insane. And so at least 2 congressional seats will be up for grabs. And then, of course, these ridiculous super majorities in the legislature, they will go away as well, we hope. And of course, abortion rights will be confirmed. So this is a very, very big deal. And we want to thank Andrea for bringing in the grassroots organizations, or at least organizing a lot of the grassroots campaigning, and you, Norm, for the great work with the progressive.org. And it still kills me. We're nonpartisan here, so this is about a candidate. It kills me that Ron Johnson is still the senator from. I could give him some good Yiddish descriptions, but we'll forgo that right now. But hopefully that will change. And you do have a senatorial race in Wisconsin next year, so this is a very, very big deal. And we appreciate both of you. Okay, so come back soon. Come back with the previous speaker in a couple of weeks, and we'll get the updates. All right.
Thank you very much.
Put all the chat.
Thanks, Harvey.
Okay, thank you. We're also joined. We're going to go nuclear now. This is a celebration of a great victory in Wisconsin. It's staggering. You mentioned, Norm, that Janet Protasewicz won by 200,000 votes in a state that Biden carried by 20. I mean, that's staggering. That's really mind-boggling when you think of it. So there's definitely a sea change, especially when you look at what also happened in Michigan. So we're also now at 5:42. We want to switch over to another, and this is a truly monumental, world-class, world history landmark with Anna Georgi here. Germany, the 4th largest country, the 4th largest economy in Europe. There we've got the obligatory banner here. Steve, can you put up the post picture of Anna with her banner? Germany has shut its last nuclear power plant. This is almost impossible to overstate in terms of its importance. And there's Anna at the Greenfield Common with her German banner. I got to say, Anna is responsible for introducing much of the German content to the American anti-nuclear movement. And you were just there, Anna, and then we'll follow you with Scott Denman and Linda Pence-Gunter to talk about the bigger, broader implications of this shutdown. But I talked about it on the Greenpeace call on Saturday within hours, and put up a piece. Steve Caruso posted it at the freepress.org. We had the first piece, post-shutdown piece out there on the internet. It is a very, very big deal. Anna, can you tell us, from your recent visit to Germany, what happened here?
Okay, well, thanks so much. It's a real pleasure to be here and great honor and to tell you a little bit about what's going on. But I wanted to express the news from the movement itself, because one of the big things is that Germany, the size of California, was planned for having like 60 nukes, 38 actually were built, many of them never opened, but there has been an amazing movement since 1975, especially. And I think one thing we want to know is how did they do it? And so I wanted to express how the group, the national coordinating group of all the, they call them Radiate, which is the National Anti-Atomic Organization, and their goal is to support the work of local public protests. So that's who made the banner, and they work with small groups all over Germany, and this is how they expressed their victory. Okay, so this is an English translation. With a huge anti-nuclear sun projected onto the cooling tower of the nuclear power plant Emsland, activists of the nationwide anti-nuclear organization, Ausgestrahlt, so radiation, honored on April 10th the historic success of the anti-nuclear movement, which means the shutdown of the last nuclear power plants on Saturday, April 15th. In their hands, they held a banner that said, "One together," WON, "one together, 50 years of anti-nuclear movement." And this is what the spokesperson said: "The anti-nuclear phase out and the shutdown of the last nuclear power plants in Germany is a success of the commitment of hundreds of thousands of citizens. For more than 5 decades, they have used their persistence, imagination, and ever-new protests to make the good arguments against nuclear power prevail. Together, they have won what is probably the biggest dispute in the history of the Federal Republic of Germany. Probably never before has a citizens' movement achieved anything comparable. Without the constant pressure from the anti-nuclear movement, there would never have been a political decision to phase out nuclear power, nor would it ever have become reality. At the same time, the anti-nuclear movement helped launch and enable the worldwide triumph of renewable energies. With the shutdown of the last power reactors on Saturday, the risk of a catastrophic accident in Germany is dramatically reduced, and the production of highly radioactive nuclear waste in the nuclear power plants has stopped. At the same time, the nuclear power plant phase out is an important step for the energy transition. Now it is important to secure the success that has been achieved. Instead of nuclear power, no thanks, it is now nuclear power, never again. And even after the shutdown of the nuclear power plants, numerous nuclear power problems remain. These include mountains of nuclear waste that must be stored safely, a nuclear industry that continues to do business from Germany, the EU's pro-nuclear policy, and the danger that continues to emanate from nuclear power plants in the neighboring countries. So we're not running out of work anytime soon, despite the historic success we're celebrating on Saturday. So that's
fantastic.
The word. Woo! That's the word from them. And so it's kind of on to the EU and to fight this movement, which we know here, don't build new ones, but if they're running, because if they don't make CO2, we should keep them running as part of a climate change strategy. And so they said, we're celebrating, but with eyes open.
Fantastic. Well, you recall the great quote from A.J. Musty, the wonderful pacifist organizer, who said about a life in activism, he said, the pay's no good, but the work is steady. So,
and you get great T-shirts. I thought I'd pull this out of the closet.
Oh yes, fantastic.
45 years old.
There you go. Unbelievable. In 1976, we had the first occupations at Seabrook. We stopped Unit 2 rather, but anyway, fantastic report, Anna. And
can I just say that those occupations here were based on the very first ones in Germany, in the rural town of Wiel, where farmers in February 75, when farmers and housewives and 28,000 student supporters came and occupied the site. And I see that Betsy Corners is on this call, and that's really wonderful. She's been there, I was there, and we brought home the news and the strategy.
Yes, indeed, fantastic. And Betsy is a great hero with Randy Keeler there. We have other veterans. Carl Grossman, although he looks much too young.
Where is he? Carl, where are you?
He's down there on the bottom right. He was very instrumental in shutting the Shoreham reactors. We can now have brag that we have the Indian Point reactors shut down. It is headed in the right direction. I read the New York Times article about the shutdown, and they have all these people quoted saying that this was a dumb thing to do. Nobody spoke to the reasons that it was done, and in fact, the Germans have prevailed. They're treating Germany like it was some kind of hippie commune, where all these people, when in fact German industry and Angela Merkel, who will go down in history as one of the great leaders of Europe, made the decision to do it, and by God, they did it. They did
it was because of the demonstrations before and after Fukushima.
Yes, absolutely. The quick story, and I had a piece up, Steve, if you could put the link to the piece from the Free Press. The story is that the Green Movement called a major national rally in 2011 to shut the reactors in Germany. And then before the rally happened, Fukushima happened. And Angela Merkel, who's trained as a chemist, said, well, maybe we need to reconsider. And they have had a very smooth, it's called an Energiewende, a very smooth transition to renewables. And it's working. We had that same plan in California. And unfortunately, our governor, who is nowhere near as smart as Angela Merkel, is stabbing us in the back. And so we want California, oh yeah, there's the piece. We want California to follow now immediately with Germany and shut down these last two reactors. I want Scott Dimon, I want to give you a couple minutes, and then Linda Pence-Gunter. Scott has been very instrumental in the movement, especially in the shutdown of the reactor. Can we unmute Scott and Linda, especially in the reactors the reactor was shut at Rancho Seco in 1989. Scott Demon, go ahead, please, Scott.
That's great. Well, I want to say thank you, Anna, for your leadership. I think it's important to remember that Anna, as the director of Critical Mass, the Ralph Nader wing of Congress Watch and Public Citizen, as the director of that, she wrote the initial Bible on the safe energy movement, anti-nuclear movement, which is called No Nukes. There it is, Everyone's Guide to Nuclear Power. And
we now refer to it as the Old Testament, but go ahead.
I've got a couple boxes in the basement. If anyone's interested, you can get it.
Well, I guess what I have to do is introduce the New Testament, which is we've got our hands full. The Biden administration, the nuclear industry, academia, the Third Way and other hypesters are pushing these small nuclear reactors as the new and improved nuclear technology, when in fact the first one out of the gates that's been supported by taxpayers and pushed for the state of Utah and to be built at the in the Idaho National Engineering Lab is already 7 years behind schedule, and it will be at least 14 years behind schedule before it's ever built. It's still on the drawing board, and the price has doubled from $55 a megawatt hour to $110 or $120. And it's the old myth. And we know that every single reactor in the United States, when you add it all up and you do the math, the cost is always 3 times more, has always been on average 3 times more than the original estimate. And it's at least twice as long delayed. And the latest example of this is in Vogtle, where the last 2 reactors that weren't canceled in the so-called nuclear renaissance in the United States Those last two are now $34 billion budgeted, still prices going up, and they are over 7 years delayed. And the original price on that was $14 billion for those reactors. We'll never get not even a cost-effective, we'll get a gold-plated electric bill from that plant to every Georgia ratepayer that ever gets anything out of it. It's insane. The staff of the Public Utility Commission down there voted to terminate it recommended to terminate it in 2017. And the 5 members, the elected members who were paid off by the Nuclear Energy Institute, $1.25 million for that campaign, they voted 5-0 to keep it going. It goes on and on like that, but this is what we've got. And within the new IRA Act, we've heard a lot of good things about the IRA Act in terms of pushing EVs and moving forward in overall sustainable energy, but it's got hundreds of billions of dollars in refinancing available for nuclear power plants. It's got new money for energy research and development demonstration for nuclear power plants. Now the Department of Energy is working in I won't say collusion because they're doing it publicly, but with the state regulatory agencies and the oversight, NASIO, the energy oversight state offices, to move nuclear power through the regulatory process in these states. And we found at least 23 states are now moving to develop these small modular reactors. So the ripoff continues, the tremendous sweeping under the rug of nuclear waste, the threat to national security. We're seeing it in Ukraine. This continues. The corporate malfeasance continues. But the beautiful thing about all this is this movement, which began in the 60s and 70s, is now has now got victories with solar and wind, utility scale solar and wind being 4 times cheaper than new nuclear power, according to the premier Wall Street Journal analytic firm, Lazard. So it's a matter of just sticking to the truth. And even though it's a Diane versus Goliath situation, we need to keep hammering. We need to keep demonstrating, and we need to force the media, which has taken this hook, line, and sinker. Once again, we need to confront and speak truth to this corrupt power. So I'm grateful for all that you folks do. Linda Pence Gunter, I've worked with her for years, Harvey and Anna and many others, and Carl. I mean, that's one thing I want to say. The last thing I'll say is how wonderful it is, how wonderful as a human being to work with people who are like these folks and like you all out there who share the same values. It's hard, tough work, but can you imagine selling cars? I mean,
we're selling EVs now, so we are now in the car business.
So just love to you all, and we'll keep at it no matter how gray and white our hair gets. So
thank you so much, Scott. Really.
Namaste.
Namaste, and it's so great to celebrate a victory. If I drank, I'd go out and get some German beer, but you know, what the heck. Linda Pence Gunter has been a great expert and a great mover in this movement. And Linda, you want to throw in some of your Deutschmarks here?
Absolutely, yes. And first of all, you know, Scott is the reason I'm sitting here at all. He got me into this mess. I'm not sure if I should say thank you. Anyway, here we are, all of us together, and also introduced me to my husband. So there we go. But I did want to go back to Germany just for a moment, because not to sort of break your spell about Angela Merkel, Harvey, who you seem to love greatly, but just to be clear, I mean, first of all,
I was enamored of her when Trump tried to seduce her in front of the show. That was a great moment.
You sure that was the Tracy Ullman show you were watching?
Right.
But anyway, you know, so Merkel was a physicist, not a chemist, which is better news actually, because then she really does know the subject. But the Energiewende, you know, the Green German Revolution began long before her. Of course, back in 2000 with the passage of the Renewable Energy Act. And really, the reason that we have the renewable energy revolution in Germany is because of the nuclear phase out. So when you hear all this nonsense about, well, you know, they're just torpedoing their own revolution by phasing out nuclear, it's the reason it happened at all. And the reason is that the deal that was made for this Renewable Energy Act was that if we were to phase out nuclear in Germany, it must be replaced by renewables and not fossil fuels. So that opened the way for a huge stimulus of renewable energy development, combined with the fact that then they set up what they call this feed-in tariff, which set a price for renewable energy generated electricity that was guaranteed for 20 years. So it gave people a lot of security in terms of investing in that. And of course, it boomed really big because individuals then decided to buy in it, not just corporations. And they also gave grid priority to renewables. So that's what started it. And actually, Angela Merkel sort of put the brakes on it a little bit in 2016 and made it more difficult to introduce renewables as quickly. So there was a little bit of a downshift there, but it's obviously back in business now. They've already replaced these 3 nukes with renewables before they even closed. The whole situation is going to accelerate now towards a 2045 carbon neutral economy. So it is a great success story, but the anti-nuclear movement needs to take the credit for it because that's what happened in 2000. That's why it happened. It was politically impossible to support nuclear power. I mean, can you imagine every political party being anti-nuclear? That was the situation in Germany. That's a kind of fantasy here, right? So right. I think those are the lessons that we need to take away from the German success today.
Absolutely. You know, I got to point out 2 things. First of all, my buddy Dave Saltman says that Angela is a quantum chemist, whatever. I think that's a chemist who takes LSD. But I'm not sure. But the point is also that California, based on the German plan, signed a similar deal in 2016 to shut the 2 reactors at Diablo Canyon. And Gavin Newsom is now doing what Angela Merkel didn't, thank God. I mean, she may have put the brakes on a little bit, but Gavin Newsom is now trying to kill the whole deal and keep Diablo Canyon open, which is catastrophic. And so that's our renewed. And if we win in California, we will have the 4th and 5th biggest economies in the world being post-nuclear. So that is the work that's really cut out for us now, especially in California. This is a wonderful group. We have more than 90 people on. I don't know if Stephen Donziger has joined us. Deepa Driver is with us from the Assange movement. Wendy, can you keep your eye open for Stephen Donziger?
He's not joined us yet.
The listeners that are with us at Progressive Radio Network, we are going to now switch over. Your show will end, but the next hour, and as this, will be posted at electionprotection2024.org. This is the 133rd Green Emergency Election Protection Coalition Zoom call. And Ron Leonard, if you can comment on the impact. Ron is one of our great solar geniuses and pioneer on the impact of this German shutdown on the renewable energy industry. That would be really helpful here, because it's a 2-sided coin. Not only did we shut nuclear power, but as Linda points out, we are flipping this enormous economy in the heart of Europe into renewables.
And it's a coin well spent, because in Germany, you note that economy is really a manufacturing economy. And we are seeing right now, present numbers, over 50% of the power regularly coming from renewable energy in Germany. And the grid is not failing. The world is not ending. People are spending less for energy and getting clean energy, which is reliable. So that is the false rumor. You want to say something, Anna?
Oh, I want to point out the best, and I'll get you next. The best line I ever heard about this transition in Germany was on Fox News. One of their resident geniuses said it was easier for Germany to go to solar energy than California, because they have so much more sunlight in Germany than they have in California. Anyway, I wish I had that on tape. Anna, did you want to say something? Anna?
Yeah, don't laugh. With climate change, it's unbelievable. They're having droughts and it's very, very serious. Yeah, the renewables is great, but the basic dependence of the industry and home heating was on Russian gas, and the U.S. war crime of blowing up those the pipelines, Nord Stream 1 and 2, has aggravated the situation. But already before, they are going towards LNG, liquefied natural gas, from US and Qatar. So it's the fight is really ongoing in terms of renewables. And I know Linda knows a lot more about this.
Right. I want to
And
point
the
out.
interesting point is that they are seeing the practical alternative to that reliance on a fossil fuel. They're putting in massive amounts of heat pumps, and they're powering those heat pumps by the solar on their roofs. And in the United States, we probably see maybe maximum about 10% of solar roofs have a battery in there. In Germany, you're going to see 60, 70% of those solar roofs with a battery system. This is smart. And I realized this in 2000 when I was in the Hanover World's Fair. Germany is equal to basically Alaska in terms of latitude. These guys are serious about doing this, and it works.
And I want to point out, this is the other thing. None of the articles I've read about Germany going post-nuclear have said this. Next door, France, you have the poster child for the atomic energy industry. They built 56, 57 commercial reactors. They bragged about having a standard design. They have Westinghouse 900s and 1300s, around 56 reactors, more than half of which have been shut for various structural problems, and also because the rivers in France got too hot to cool the reactors. And so here you have Germany, which had 17, and they're shut and they're doing great. And here you have France, which had 56 or 57, and they are completely screwed because France is going into a deep energy crisis because of the total failure of their wonderful nuclear power industry. It's really an amazing contrast to see. Tatanka, you're in California with us. Tell us what you want to say about how we got to shut Diablo Canyon, please.
Well, thank you. I'm going to talk about that. First, I want to thank everyone who has been speaking on this, and everyone who's worked for so long, myself included, Harvey included. Thank you so much for getting on and talking about this. Yes, I want to have Linda Seeley back, Mothers for Peace, who was suing PG&E to stop that reopening of Diablo Canyon. She's a neighbor now. We live about 20 minutes away because I'm about 20 minutes away from that nuclear power plant, Diablo, right now, the devil. So thank you, everybody, for the movement. We got to build this up. I would like to have Danny Sheehan back on fairly soon to talk about a number of things. The Let's Green California, the act we got passed last year, the one we're doing this year for the EV cars in California, also about the Progressive Cabinet and Waiting Project, also about the RICO suit that is almost complete to get to Rob Bonta to hold the major oil companies responsible. It's the only way to pierce the corporate veil and get them liable for all the work that they've done against the planet and ourselves. I also want to get, I would love to get Leno Rosavila, old organizer that I worked with both at Amnesty International and the Farm Workers, who is a major distributor of the Dolores Huerta beer. He's been taking it to the migrants at the border and all folks at Uvalde. There is a beer with the name Dolores Huerta on it now. But more seriously, to begin the conversation about climate restoration and to have an author on that really has, I think, a solution about that. That is to not stop, you notice 2024 carbon neutral in Europe. And we're talking about in here, 2045, I'm sorry. We're talking about carbon zero. Even if we get to carbon zero, there is still, that means not putting any more up than we're taking down. There's still so much up there. We have to aim at pre-industrial levels. Right. We have to aim at climate restoration, restoring the climate. So that's the next stage. After we stop all the worst stuff, we have to get to the best stuff.
Excellent. Those of you who are on hoping for Stephen Donziger, Wendy, I don't know if we can contact him. We still don't see him on the call. And Deepa
Yeah.
will come to you as soon as we can when Stephen shows up. Deepa, you'll segue in for us, please, on the Julian Assange situation. Danette, you had a hand, and then Justin, Dorothy, and Eric.
Yeah, thank you, Sluggo. I wanted to update the group. Ron L. had dropped some information about the CPUC killing affordable rooftop solar. The deadline passed on the 15th. And we actually have an update from Solar Alliance. There is a it's not a lawsuit, but it's a they're coming back at the CPUC for their decision. It's the Center for Biological Diversity, the Protect Our Communities Foundation, the Environmental Working Group are the three groups that are pressing ahead with calling the CPUC on the horrible decision. They actually went against laws that are already on the books. That's kind of the approach that they're taking. I don't know if I have the permission to release the decision. I'm sure it's public, but if anyone needs it, let me know. I can email it to you. There's also, yeah, let me see if I can find that here really quick here.
If you can give Steve Donziger a call, maybe that would be great. Thank you.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I was gonna text him, but I can call him if you want.
Okay.
So this is the organization letter that we can sign on to about the this is an addendum to the act. This is called the Solar Access Act, SB 379. It's basically streamlining, giving the cities streamlining permission to get solar in their communities. It's super important too. But I just wanted to update everyone that the CPUC is being challenged on their decision.
Okay, yeah, we got to fight them. There is one thing we will talk about in a future call as well. Wendy's on the phone trying to get Steve Donziger as promised here. Is this? I lived many years in Ohio, and Ohio is sitting on about $7 billion worth of wind and solar development that's being killed by the gerrymandered legislature in Ohio, which was bribed with $6 million to pass a pro-nuclear bill. And meanwhile, they're killing renewable energy and a tremendous amount of wind development that's ready to go in Northern Ohio. One of the great travesties. They're doing the opposite of what Germany has done, and they need to be called out on it. We'll talk about that in a later call. Justin and then Dorothy, go ahead. Justin, are you unmuted?
Yeah, so Tatanka was talking about piercing that corporate veil, and Harvey, you're bringing up something really important about that $60 million bribe. But a documentary that was released by PBS not all that long ago, Frontline series, actually goes into detail on how Exxon was actually ousting their own climate scientists. And that's kind of relevant to Stephen Donziger coming on, because Chevron has been trying to cover up their malfeasance in Ecuador, which is what Donziger was exposing. So all these things are decisions made in the boardroom. They need to be exposed, but they also really need to have their money cut off from them. And so that's why I keep mentioning this national movement with Jamie Raskin to multinational money out of elections. So we'll talk more about that later.
Okay, thank you. When did you have news from Steve Donziger?
Yeah, I'm gonna email him the link. It wasn't working through his phone, and he's gonna try to delay. He can only stay till 6:45, but he's delaying his next call for us. So let me do that right now so he can get on, and he's calling his other call right now.
Sorry about that. We still have 90 people with us. As soon as Steve comes on, we'll go to Deepa to give us a quick update on Julian Assange. Dorothy.
Hey, Sluggo,
yeah.
why don't we go to Deepa now? And
well,
then...
Dorothy's been waiting, and then Eric, and then
okay.
Okay.
So I just wanted to give you a little report on California. So, and Mila was the one who told me this. So there was a bill called AB 65 that was going to encourage the building of mini nuclear facilities all over the state of California. That bill died in committee. But we need to be aware that two of our people that we think are on our side, Sheldon Whitehouse and Brian Schatz, are big nuclear supporters, and they were backing that bill. So they have their own bill in Congress right now that's supporting nuclear proliferation, I should say. But so we need to keep an eye on our friends as well as our enemies.
Yeah, that was Stalin. Keep your friends close, but your enemies closer. Thank you for that, Dorothy. We appreciate it. Eric, and then we'll go to Deepa. Ruth Strauss is in there. Eric Lazarus and Ruth Strauss, if you'll both unmute, please. And then Deepa Driver, we'll start with you and we'll go straight to Steve Donziger. Deepa, are you still with us? Yes. Okay.
Testing 1, 2, 3. Am I audible? What's
very quickly, please.
Okay, great. So I'm working on a send up of a Wall Street Journal editorial that says that you can prove that fossil fuels are essential to a modern economy because Germany's amount of coal went up by 3% over 3 years. It's pretty ridiculous. So anyone who wants to help produce this video or going to try to make it go viral, I'm Eric. Thanks so much. Eric L. Lazarus on Instagram or Facebook. Thanks so much. 2 L's in a row.
Put your link in the chat. Germany started burning more coal for France. They've been exporting power into France. It's a French problem. Ruth Strauss and then Deepa. Ruth, real quickly, and Deepa, I hope you're unmuted.
About the CPUC, I testified at that hearing. There were like 100 people that testified against, and there was one guy, that testified for nuclear. And they did, I'm not sure what decision that the person was talking about earlier, because they came out with a decision, keep the ratepayer not getting the discount that they were getting before and kill solar and all of that. What I wanted to know is there any way to do a ballot referendum?
Yeah, we should. It would cost a fortune, and we have to get like 500,000 signatures, but it would be a great thing to do, and we should do it, absolutely. Thank you for that suggestion, Ruth. Okay, and this has been a great discussion. We should have one of these every week to celebrate another victory. I don't know if we'll get another Germany, but we'll keep at it. Let's move on now. We're expecting Steve Donziger to get on, so we'll go to Deepa Driver. Thank you, everybody, by the way. Tatanka, Scott, Linda, Anna, great to see Betsy Corner on here. People who've been with us, Mila, Carl. I mean, it's been an incredible ride in the anti-nuclear movement. It is 50 years for a lot of us. 1973 is when the utility industry came in to Montague, Massachusetts, and we said no nukes. That is 50 years ago, and it's gone by like a minute. So there you go. I will say that back when they came into Montague, I had teeth and knees, and so it shows you how much things.
Even Donziger is here.
I just let Steve Donziger in, Harvey.
Oh, there you go, Steve. So we want to thank you for joining us. We want Deepa Driver, if you can, Deepa, can you segue in with the Julian Assange movement and with Steve Donziger? We're going to give you as much time as you've got. So Deepa Driver, will you do your intro and then come on in, tell us what's happening with Julian Assange, and then we'll go straight to Steve Donziger.
Thank you. Thanks for having me again. For those of you who don't know me, I'm the legal observer in the Assange case on behalf of the Haldane Society of Socialist Lawyers in the UK and the United European Left in the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe. And for the last 4 years, I have been following the case quite closely. And although I don't speak on behalf of either of the groups which will report formally, I think I just wanted to share with you where we are in terms of the case and how things are. It's also a real pleasure to be here with Stephen Donziger, whose case I have followed and remotely monitored at one stage because we were waiting to hear whether it was progressing.
Well, I understand that Steve Donziger has spoken recently at a Julian Assange rally. Is that right, Steve? Are you?
I think he's
unmuted?
spoken publicly on multiple occasions now.
Great.
Yes.
So, Deep, if you can link the Assange case with Stephen, and then we'll turn it over to Stephen, that'd be wonderful. Thank you.
Thanks. So just very quickly, Julian Assange, as you know, is is the award-winning publisher who is now entering his 5th year of incarceration in Belmarsh Maximum Security Prison in London. And while the British authorities continue to lecture Russia and everybody else on press freedom, they have no shame in holding.
Deepa, excuse me just for a second. Stephen is very limited the amount of time he can spend with us. So we'd like to get to him and then we can go back to you on some of this.
Okay, that's fine, but it is about 20 past 11 my time. So what time do you want me back in?
Steve, how long can you stay? Steve, Dante?
I can stay about 15 minutes. But I mean, if you can go first, I'll wait. It's fine.
No, it's just, I'll try and be quick, Stephen, because it's important that people hear from you because you're on the coalface of the actual action. I think the most important things to say is that Julian has now spent 4 years on remand, which means that he's not being, he doesn't have a chance of a fair process in the UK. The United States have attempted to assassinate him. They have got all his legally privileged documentation, as well as monitored his conversations with his lawyers. And the British are very clearly complicit in the whole process, as we know from the evidence that has emerged in the UK. So this is essentially punishment through process. And it is really important that, as in France, where today, or a day ago, the largest French journalists union has made Julian an honorary member, it is really important that activists on the ground in the US, where the prosecution and the persecution is coming from, take real action. Because if you care about the climate, as I can hear you talking about the climate, I hear you talking about democracy, then you must care about the case of Assange, because without supporting whistleblowers and without supporting those who defend the law, those who defend press freedom, we cannot deal with any of the other crises that are around, because unless the people who really know what's going on tell us the truth, and this truth is disseminated to people, we can't have intelligent conversations. All we can have is misinformation and disinformation.
Thank you so much.
And listen very carefully to Stephen.
Thank you, Deepa, and stay with us, please. We'll have you on the backside of Stephen. Stephen, I want to give you a heads up. Dorothy Reich, who's on the call with us, wants to invite you to California to a major fundraiser there. And if anybody can do a great fundraiser, take it from me, it's Dorothy Reich. So don't pass up this invitation, and you can stay with me in my house in the Valley, and you'll be very well taken care of. Stephen, you are a hero to so many of us. There are 90 people on the call. We just speak your piece, please. I think most of us know the story, and tell us what we need to hear.
Thank you for inviting me. Thanks to everyone for joining me and listening, and the support. A few points. First of all, thank you for that brief summation of Julian's case, and I want to talk about that and how I think our two cases have something very important in common. But first, to just give a quick update on my situation. A week from tomorrow is the 1-year anniversary of my release from detention. I spent 993 days locked up with an ankle bracelet and home, and 45 of those days were in a federal prison after I was convicted without a jury on a criminal contempt of court charge filed by a judge who had his charges rejected by the federal prosecutor here in Manhattan. The judge then appointed a private law firm that had Chevron as a client to prosecute me in the name of the US government. So I was prosecuted. I think I'm the first, maybe the only, I think I'm the only person in the history of the United States ever to be prosecuted by a corporation. And I was prosecuted by the corporation against whom I had helped indigenous peoples in Ecuador's Amazon win a $10 billion pollution judgment. Obviously, there's a lot of problems with this. I think it's patently unconstitutional. It violates the rule of law, violates international law. Two sort of things have happened in the last year on the legal front of note as regards that. One is I took my appeal all the way to the Supreme Court, even though I had served the entirety of my sentence. And it was bizarre. I don't know what you folks know about the Supreme Court, but it takes 4 of the 9 justices to take an appeal. Only about 1 out of every 100 petitions for appeal are accepted into the court. And the court met 5 separate times, and they kept relisting my case, my appeal. Each time they were agonizing, they couldn't make a decision. There was something going on that was very unusual, and ultimately the court decided not to take my appeal, but 2 justices, 2 conservative justices, Gorsuch and Kavanaugh, Gorsuch wrote a dissent, Kavanaugh signed it, basically agreeing with everything I and others on our team have been yelling and screaming about for the past several years, which was that this private corporate prosecution was illegal, and the whole thing should have.
Stephen, we're having technical trouble here.
Right. Let's shut this video off. Stephen Doziger, if you can hear us, I'm going to shut your video off.
I'm back if you can hear me.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead, Steve.
Okay. In any event, you know, I came to the end of the road on this aspect of the case because of the Supreme Court refusal to hear my appeal. I was, needless to say, extremely disappointed that none of the 3 liberal justices joined with Kavanaugh and Gorsuch to take the case. And I actually thought if the court took the case, I was going to get a 9-0 decision in my favor. So that is very disappointing. I think it illustrates just how far our country has gone in terms of the judiciary into a sort of a corporate dominated posture. I am now preparing with some lawyers a petition to the United Nations against the US government for violating international law by letting me be detained illegally. There's a group at the UN called the Working Group on Arbitrary Detention. I think Julian Assange knows about this as well, and they already have ruled once that my pretrial detention was illegal, and they ordered the US government to free me and compensate me for the deprivation of liberty. The Justice Department and President Biden ignored that completely. We're going to go back to them. We're also going to be seeking a pardon. The bigger issue, and by the way, for all this, I need support, and I'll get to that in a second. I hope we can continue to get your support. The bigger issue is the people of Ecuador who are still suffering because of Chevron's poison. I mean, I know you know some about the case, but just to remind you, Chevron, as a matter of engineering design, built hundreds of wells in the Amazon that deliberately discharge cancer-causing oil waste into rivers and streams that local communities were using for their drinking water. Many, many people have died. Many have contracted illnesses. I believe hundreds, if not thousands more, will perish from this poison if there's no cleanup. Chevron has refused to clean up. They are using the attacks on me to distract attention from their environmental criminality in the Amazon. And it's tricky as heck because I really need protection, and people need to understand how what happened to me as a matter of fundamental justice needs to be dealt with and addressed as a matter of what kind of society we want to live in the United States. It needs to be understood that what happened to me is a playbook for further corporate and fossil fuel industry attacks on activists. And it goes so far beyond me to affect everything that all of us on this call do, and literally millions of people in our country do. So we have to make sure this does not happen again to anybody, and we have to continue fighting spread the word and call attention to what happened to me, because it is a illustration of something broader and really very nefarious at play in our country. So that's a brief summation. I just want to talk quickly about Julian Assange and sort of how to connect the dots here. I recently finished an extraordinary book about Julian's case called The Trial of Julian Assange. It's written by an extremely respected international lawyer named Nils Meltzer, who used to be the special rapporteur for torture at the United Nations. Nils, in his book, documents the Assange case from beginning to end. And he describes the appalling behavior of the governments of the United States, the United Kingdom, Australia, and Sweden in really conspiring, and I would argue criminally, to destroy this man's life. And I, like many Americans and even progressive Americans, was a little bit confused by some of the press reports about what kind of person Julian was. And I always supported Julian, but I wasn't a full-throated supporter, to be frank, until I read Nils's book. And it's the most extraordinary book, and I would urge each of you to get it and to tell everyone you know to read it, because I think what's happening to Julian and what happened to me are part and parcel of the same strategy, which is when a lawyer or an advocate gets too close to power. In my case, we won a multi-billion-dollar judgment against a very powerful oil company that threatened the entire industry. And in Julian's case, he exposed US war crimes in a way that completely threatened the national security state, not only the United States, but all the Five Eyes countries. And when that happens, the rapidity with which the judiciary discards the rule of law to go after someone and try to destroy their lives is something that is really frightening, and something that I, as a young lawyer, never thought could happen in our country, much less to me. So I would say, and I don't mean to compare myself to Julian, he has suffered so much, but that's not really the point. We don't really compare violations of human rights, what's better, what's worse. They're all terrible, okay? And I just want to say that the Julian Assange case, the Stephen Donziger case, what's happening in Atlanta with Cop City, with protesters charged with domestic terrorism with absolutely no evidentiary basis, is all part of a strategy by corporate elites in this country, with a huge influence by the fossil fuel industry specifically, to try to completely change the nature of our society, so we no longer have the freedom to engage in protest, civil disobedience, effective civil disobedience that has the chance of actually changing things for the better. The level of police repression in Atlanta is shocking to me, but it's happening right now. Okay. A private corporate prosecution happened to me. It was just legalized by the US Supreme Court. I thought they would take the case, reverse it. They didn't. The Julian Assange case just keeps going with more and more layers of awful repression and violations of human rights. So we need to connect these cases and understand, I think, the larger threat to our freedoms and our, what's left of our liberal democracy in the United States. And as for me personally, I have a website called freedonziger.com. I got so much support, by the way, on my detention, and I'm really happy to see the support Julian is getting, because that solidarity is vital to save people's lives who get put in these positions, to give them hope and to boost their spirits and to understand, how we're really all in this together. And I needed what I got. I was really happy to get the support of 68 Nobel laureates and 120 NGOs. And I continue to need it because you know what? My case isn't over. Chevron still has my passport. They still have a pending civil case where they're trying to get my computer. If Judge Kaplan wanted to, he could charge you with criminal contempt tomorrow and have me locked up, given the Supreme Court decision. It can happen all over again. So I live in a constant state of danger. It's sort of baked into my life. I have my wife, Laura Miller, my son, Matthew, is now a junior in high school. We're used to it. Please don't get me wrong. We're pretty good. We're happy. We love each other. We're grateful to be alive. Okay. But we live with this danger every single day. And one of the reasons I keep fighting, and take it to the Supreme Court and take it to the United Nations Working Group, when I seem to kind of lose everything, at least in the US courts, is because the act of fighting it is how you protect the rule of law. It's how you test the system. It's how you point out the hypocrisies in the system. And it's ultimately makes it harder for Chevron and Judge Kaplan to come after me, knowing that other judges and other jurists, whether they be in the United States in the form of Neil Gorsuch and Brett Kavanaugh, who are now on to them and agree with me, or the 5 international jurists who comprise the working group from super respected lawyers and judges from other countries, they hate scrutiny. So I need support. I need to keep pushing in whatever forum I can that's viable to be sure that they don't get away with this, and attention is always focused on what happened.
Your story is astounding, as is your articulation and your power. Thank you so much, Stephen. I mean, it's really incomprehensible what's been done to you. And could you very quickly, and then we'll go to Dorothy, tell us about the judgment that you got against Chevron that made them so focused on doing what they did to you?
So the underlying case was a simple pollution case. I mean, honestly, it was as simple as like a backyard pollution issue writ large, because what happened was spread over 1,500 square miles, comprised hundreds of oil waste pits and toxic dumping that was systematic at 4 million gallons a day at its height into rivers and streams. And it was an area where 5 indigenous groups had lived for millennia and, lived beautifully and prosperously with no money as we understand it, but they were rich. They had wealth from the forest. And in a few short years, this was all ruined. And these cultures became decimated because of the greed of this oil company from the United States. And I can say, as an American citizen traveling to this part of the world, I felt a real personal stake in this case beyond my obligation as a lawyer to represent my clients. I mean, this was my country letting a private company go into another country and kill people, because that's what the net effect was when you dump oil waste deliberately at that level, that magnitude into the forest. So, it created a very intense bond, I think, between those of us from up here who were working on it, the leaders of the communities who were being poisoned systematically. And that power and that bond and that model of South-North, of support, financial support from the North feeding into the Amazon, so these indigenous peoples could file their legal claims, the ability to take the hope they had for justice and get people to give money to realize a monetary result that could actually clean up the damage, was a model that Chevron was terrified of. And the fact we won the case, it was confirmed on appeal by Ecuador's Supreme Court and its Constitutional Court in unanimous opinions. It was confirmed by Canada's Supreme Court in a unanimous 2015 opinion for enforcement purposes in Canada against their assets. All of this produced a situation where the company, I think, became terrified. It was exacerbated in their minds by the fact that I did my work out of where I'm sitting right now. This is the apartment in Manhattan where I was detained for almost 3 years, right here. Spent a lot of time in this room. It's a 2-bedroom apartment. And the fact that our little team of very smart lawyers in Ecuador, here and other countries, pretty much working remotely, could win a case like this when they had hired literally dozens of law firms, spent hundreds of millions of dollars in fees to quash us. And we won anyway. And the way we financed by the way, when I say finance, we were spending a penny for every dollar they were spending, but we still needed money to do the case. It absolutely freaked them out. And their response was to try to destroy me personally. And I believe that while it has caused me pain, I believe they have failed, because I'm still speaking, I'm still alive, I'm still advocating, and I'm actually have a much bigger platform than I ever had before they went after me.
Well, you're with this fantastic group of people. We're talking with Steve Donziger, the legendary attorney who successfully got Chevron to pay all this money, and now how they jumped out of the legal system and found this judge is astounding and very disturbing that the three liberals on the Supreme Court did not back you up. That is really, really terrifying. I want to take you through, speaking of a platform, Dorothy Reich is one of the great organizers in Southern California. She has a home in Topanga that she wants to open to you for, and we can certainly guarantee you a great tour in Los Angeles.
That would be fabulous.
Bring your wife and kids.
Hold this up. If you see this, it says Bradley Manning. So this is how long
Dorothy,
our club.
Dorothy, lower your mic, please.
Okay, go ahead. That's too low. Just go ahead.
One of our first fundraisers was to raise money for Bradley Manning before he had his change. So this is how long we've been working. And if you see at the bottom, it says WikiLeaks. So, and I have been following your case for so many years, and I've been outraged and appalled at the whole situation. People who want to follow Steve you have a great Instagram feed. And also you can read his stuff on Substack.
And Twitter.
So, and Twitter, and follow you on Twitter. So every year.
Dorothy, you're so kind, and I thank you for all you've done for the world.
Yeah, so.
I would love to be in touch with you following this event.
We'll do that. I'll take care of that, Steve. We'll be in touch with Dorothy. We know where she lives, and she delivers on what she promises. Let's put it that way. So we'll get you out to California, and you'll do great work out there, and you can bring your wife and you see the ocean behind me there. We'll go jump in that as well.
Is that real, or is that a video?
Yes, both are. That's the only answer I can give you.
Hey, Sluggo, if you could give me a favor, my dear friend Ann Wilcox.
Yes, and Dorothy, thank you for that. Ann Wilcox, we're really glad to have you on with Steve Donziger. Go ahead, please. Donziger, go ahead. Ann Wilcox.
Thank you so much, Stephen. It's great to see you, and thank you for giving me a moment. I just wanted to say that U.S. Representative Rashida Tlaib has finally organized a letter of just 7 members of Congress to ask A.G. Garland to drop the prosecution of Assange or the extradition request. And this was joined by parliamentarians from other countries. And as you know, we've had rallies at the DOJ. So I just wonder if you could comment on the failure of the Congress to step forward on these issues. Thank you.
And thank you. It's great to have you on with us. Go ahead, Steve.
I'm sorry, but was there a question in there? I didn't hear it.
Yeah, I was just commenting on what Congress could do to pressure the Justice Department to drop the extradition of Julian, because it's threatening the press, it's threatening democracy. So we need to support that.
Thank you. Thanks for the question. Look, the short answer is Congress needs to do a hell of a lot more. I'm astounded at the fear among members of Congress, and I'm talking about the Democrats, to take on this issue. It's just like they shut down. I mean, the fact that only 7 members signed that letter is an embarrassment. And I think we need to, really pressure, members so they speak out on how bad this is for press and for advocacy, et cetera. So I think Congress needs to do a whole lot more. Now, in my case, I worked really hard to get my own congressman to speak out when I was on detention. Jerry Nadler, we sent him 25,000 emails. The guy never responded, ignored me completely. Okay. The Democratic Party is really weak. I'm just sorry. Okay. It's weak on these issues, and on many issues. So, it takes even more work now to move certain types of issues like Julian's. However, I think there's a lot of space to move the issue. The work needs to be done. It needs to be done in a sophisticated way. And the book, Meltzer's book, needs to be disseminated to every member of Congress. Things like that need to happen. It needs to be made an issue in a much bigger way than it has been. But I don't want to underestimate the obstacles because, I know Julian's advocates and family worked really hard on that. And I'm happy to see a letter. It's good. It's a step forward, but we need to get a lot more members onto that.
Yeah, and I want to ask if the Attorney General of the United States actually exists. I mean, has anybody actually seen this guy? Because he should be in front and getting you taken care of. Myla Reeson in Santa Monica. Myla, go ahead. Are you unmuted?
Thank you. Yeah, thank you very much. Following on your campaign to get Nadler to speak up, I recall at the time, if I'm not mistaken, that you pointed out that Nadler had a son who was on the payroll of another law firm that was doing some work for Chevron, not your case, but a similar case. And I'm wondering, I'm looking at the members of the Democratic members of the Judiciary Committee, my own and Dorothy Reich's own Congressman Ted Lieu is on that committee. I'm wondering if there are any members of any of the Democratic members of the Judiciary Committee, like Pramila Jayapal and Cori Bush and various other people who we think of as progressive or at least liberal. Have any of them come out to support you?
So the people who, yes, Cori Bush has, Jamal Bowman, AOC, Jamie Raskin, Jim McGovern. I don't know if you know Jim. He's from Massachusetts. Chuy Garcia from Chicago. A bunch of progressives came out to support me. Ultimately, even Senator Whitehouse wrote a letter complaining about kind of a side issue regarding how I was treated by the courts. I don't know, I was able to get in there a little bit, but remember, I was detained just like Julian is, and I couldn't get into Washington. So all of this sort of came out of what other people were kind enough to do on my behalf. So it's not easy, especially when the other side, and in Julian's case, the other side is the Department of Justice. I mean, I was up against a private company, still am. Julian's up against the whole national security state. I mean, that's a mountain that's 50 times higher than the one I had to climb. And believe me, my mountain was high. His is 50 times bigger. But he also has a hell of a lot of support around the world. So we need to build on that and try to move more members of Congress. Rashida Tlaib also was a huge leader on my letter, just as she was on Julian's. I admire her greatly. And, we just need to keep chopping wood and trying to move that issue.
Thank you.
Fantastic. Well, you let us know, please, which doors we should be knocking on, and we'll continue to do that. Wendy Lederman and then Tatanka. Go ahead, Wendy.
Oh, thank you. I'm surprised. It's so awesome to meet you. I'm so thrilled. Thank you so much for spending this time with us. So yeah, I'm thinking about justice reform. I mean, just even on the lower levels, as your case proves, I mean, you've really shined the light on what we call liberal just being in name only. And this really exposes that we've really just had a complete corporate takeover of the judicial system. And I found out in lower cases that the civil system is just an extortion racket for the wealth extraction of the poor. And the judges police themselves on the lower level as well, where we have like the judicial qualification committees that most people don't even realize. I'm really glad to hear that you can go to the UN, because in many cases where it might not be considered an international crime, I mean, once you get to the Supreme Court. So just curious your thoughts on, in an ideal world, an ideal America, like what would you do to reform the justice system? Oh no. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
I heard you. Stephen,
You
are
heard me?
still with us?
I
Stephen,
think internet's bad, but I can hear you. Keep going.
okay.
Oh, thank you.
Are you currently in New York?
Yes.
Do you have any events coming up?
Well, I'm speaking, yes. The answer is yes. I'm speaking Saturday with Marianne Williamson at an art gallery on Earth Day.
Where is that?
Somewhere in Manhattan, but I don't have the address handy. But if you go to my Instagram, there's an invitation. You can get the address on my Instagram.
Okay, that's great, because Marianne introduced a book of mine, and I just did an event with her. So maybe I can connect through her people, and we can help you promote that event.
That would be great. There's an invite on my Instagram, and I can also send it to you offline. I guess I could send it to Wendy. Are you the producer? Okay,
I'm one of the I'm one of the co-conveners. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you.
Send it
Okay,
to
cool.
Steve
Yeah.
Russo and Mike Hirsch. If you can do it, Steve and Mike, if you can track it down somehow, maybe we can post it in the chat before the end of this. But Steve, I'll get in touch with you and help you promote it. I'm actually in New Jersey right now, so I can come over for the event.
I knew the beaches in Jersey were. I knew someone told me they were nice. I got to get out there.
Well, you can see behind me, Bruce Springsteen just jumped in the ocean. And Wendy's got a good generic question there. I want to introduce you very quickly to Tatanka Bricca. Tatanka works with the Romero Institute and with the legendary attorney Danny Sheehan. I don't know if you've been in touch with Danny, but go ahead and follow on Wendy's question if you would.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Stephen, for your life and for your commitment. Yes, I was the first full-time organizer for Amnesty International in 73, 74 with Joan Baez and Dolores, with Janetta Sagan. And what I want to say is that you have firmly highlighted what we're up against in terms of corporate power. And I also want to tell you, I was contacted by Ken Saro-Wiwa's cousin in 1995 to get to the national press because Bill Clinton, he was simply trying to get $3 million from Shell Oil in Nigeria when they left his whole community. You know the story of Ken Saro-Wiwa, I'm sure.
Yeah.
And all he wanted was just a little bit of money. And he was imprisoned by the Nigerian military. President Bill Clinton was trying to get him out. Amnesty International had adopted him. We had leaders of countries. We had Hollywood. And we were told by him the only people that were capable of getting him out was Shell Oil. So I tried to get to a consultant of Shell Oil, and he wouldn't answer me, as normally he did. He was a top guy in with Clinton administration. And he later just fed me the CIA line on him. As we know, Ken, was the first environmental martyr that they recognized on the African continent. So you and Julian, I think our group, we need in this election protection work, we need to integrate these cases into the whole national electoral campaign and what we're doing, because this highlights what we're up against, the corporate ownership of our lives, and that we have no power without effectively taking that on. I just want to thank you. I will be at Dorothy's place for the fundraiser, and whatever I can do. I work with Lynn and Bill and John Perkins over at Pachamama, and I work with Dolores Huerta and Danny Sheehan on what we do. Just whatever I can do. I just letting you know I'm there.
That's
Okay.
Thank you so much for all you've done all these years. Danny came to visit me when I was in detention.
Yeah, he told me. That's cool.
I happened to be locked up in a halfway house when he showed up. And I have always had great admiration. I actually think he's one of the greatest lawyers in history. I think he's brilliant, courageous, creative. He's an inspiration. So please tell him hello.
I will. And there's one thing you may not know. He got a law written. It's just very new. People haven't heard about it. It's now a law that there is a new office created by Congress, signed into law. Danny wrote the bill, working in the Defense Department on behalf of his client, Luis Elizondo, who was basically unable to do his job in the Pentagon of reporting the UFO activity. There is a law now that the Defense Department, all the military, the National Intelligence Network, and private military contractors have to report all that they know to a new office, all that they know about UFOs since January of 1945. And if this seems weird, it is directly related to, the fact that we taxpayers have paid for essentially the corporation in the black box, reverse engineering. We've never needed the oil wars. We've had free energy since the Eisenhower years. And more importantly, every time nuclear issues get more severe and every time climate gets severe, the ETs swarm Moscow and Beijing and Washington. And now the blame game for blaming others for what is actually they're trying to help us is what's going on. So anyway, that's a new law that Danny wrote.
Steve, thank you, Tatanka, for that. And Steve Caruso, our engineer, has posted the beautiful poster for the Saturday event.
I did it. I'm guilty.
Mila gets credit for it. Thank you. But I will come over and see you and Marianne. I love Marianne Williamson.
Oh my God, I would love to see you. Thank you. Listen.
So and I'll be wearing my Woodstock t-shirt here. So
excuse me for interrupting you, but I unfortunately have to go to another appointment.
Okay.
So I have to get off, but I want to thank everyone. I love talking to you guys and thank you for having me. And let's do it again. Let's do it on a regular basis.
Okay, you've got Ruth Strauss on the phone here. You'll meet her. Ruth will come to the event at Dorothy's. Dr. Nancy Naparco, others. You have a family here, Steve. So thank you.
Thank you. It means a lot. And Wendy, I know I didn't really answer your question. Let's have an offline discussion or whenever. Okay, I'm sorry.
Okay.
No, don't be sorry. I would love that.
And
Thank you
anybody
so much.
else who's in New Jersey, you can drive right over with me on Saturday to the event in Manhattan. Steve, we'll see you, brother.
Thanks a lot, man. Have a good one.
All right.
Come back anytime.
Will do.
Anytime, absolutely. And come to Dorothy's. Ruth and Justin, did you want to jump in? We'll have Deepa come back, talk to us a bit more about Julian. Ruth, go ahead, then Justin, and then we'll go back to Diva. And then we're at the end of the hour. We still have 72 people on the call with us. Ruth Strauss, go ahead, please. And then
thanks. I had something to say to Steve, but I'll see him at Dorothy's. Thanks.
All right, great. Justin, go ahead.
Just real quickly, I'm sorry to interrupt, but Vinny DiStefano has an announcement at some point. I don't mind staying, and I know someone else does. So as long as we need to, but Vinny has an event for International Journalist Day. So hopefully,
we'll just carry on here. I know some people are tired, but we got 71 people for God's sake. So we'll go on as long as you want. I just jumped in the ocean. I feel very refreshed. Justin, Mila, and then Deepa. Can you stay with us, Deepa? Are you good? Good. Okay. And I did send you an email, joint email to you and Dennis Bernstein. So you need to go on Dennis's show. He's terrific, and you'll be great. Ruth, you did that. Justin, Mila, and then we'll go back to Diva.
Yeah, so I'd like to pass the floor on to Vinny here in a second, but I'll just take this real quick time to comment on Stephen's decision in front of the Supreme Court. The liberals, philosophical thing here is they don't want the big oil companies to skyrocket gas prices ahead of the 24 election. So they're kind of hedging their bets by pushing against a single lawyer. And then the conservatives that created a dissent, they're actually not for him. They are covering their own arguments in Harper versus Moore to get an imperial presidency and imperial state legislatures. So anyway, that's my commentary. We can keep going.
All right, thank you for that, Mila. We appreciate it.
I just wanted to say that I noticed that Stephen did put that poster in the chat at the time that I was sharing the poster, so I didn't want to steal credit from our wonderful engineers, Steve Caruso. I just didn't notice until I stopped sharing my screen. But I hope you'll have a chance to go and see Marianne and Stephen on Earth Day, Harvey.
Yeah, I will go into New York. All of you who are in New Jersey can come in with me, and we'll meet Bruce Springsteen there. We'll have a great time. Okay, Deepa Driver, you want to jump in here? Come back to us and give us. Oh, I'm sorry, Vinny. Vinny, can you give us an update, and then we'll go to
No. Deepa goes first. It's past midnight where she is. So please,
oh, yeah,
Deepa.
Okay, Deepa. I'm a night owl, but you may not be. So just fill us in, and then you can go take a nap.
Thanks. Yeah, I have a young child who wakes up at 5:45, so it's well past my bedtime.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, thanks very much, Vinny. I guess the important things that I've got to say are that, I was listening to Stephen, and I don't know much about how the US Supreme Court works. But it strikes me as really interesting, the parallel between what's happening in the US and in other parts of the world, where, in Britain, I'm an academic and trade unionist, and a lot of work I do is around state accountability for criminality and corporate accountability for criminality. And quite a lot of the time, the efforts for accountability are damaged not by the right, but by the liberal left. And that's what really worries me, because there is a weaponization of whether it is equalities issues, protection of women, protection of trans rights, protection of all kinds of other rights, to use identity as a cover for undermining general workers' rights or civil liberties. And this is a very, very cynical use of these hard-won rights. And so I think in the Assange case, there has been, especially in the last decade, the way in which the liberal news outlets have worked to demonize Assange and to create a sense within many in the left that other causes are more important and other causes are worth devoting energy to. And to try and allow us to say, we don't have to think about Assange, as Stephen said earlier, he wasn't one of the most vocal supporters before. That's the success of this kind of narrative where the left's concern with equalities is being used to undermine us. And I think it's not just on equalities, it's also on climate and so many other things. So I think we need to talk about that and understand it, because just like in America, where I don't see that much of a difference between corporate-owned Democrats and corporate-owned Republicans, in Britain, I don't see much of a difference between corporate-owned Labour and corporate-owned Tory party, both of whom only serve the interests of the 1%. And so it is really important that in this context, Julian and WikiLeaks, Chelsea undertook, it was so wonderful to see Dorothy Reich's poster from the Bradley Manning days, and to hear about the solidarity around the world for those who allow us to know what's really happening behind closed doors. And I think we have to do more, because, Julian, we're 20 years after the Iraq War, 20 years since WikiLeaks well, 10 years at least since WikiLeaks revealed information about war crimes. And yet we've had Libya, Syria, Yemen. And this is because it's not just about, I think we've been focusing a lot on disclosure and transparency, but it's also about political organization. And that's where I think I just wanted to flag something that somebody said in passing. I'm sorry I haven't been able to respond to all the chat messages. It's scrolling up too fast for me and I'm really exhausted. But one of the things somebody said in the chat was, we need to do things differently and take the lead from the French trade unions. But if local groups all over the United States, all over Britain, local trade union groups, local community groups, adopted people like Stephen and Donziger and made them honorary members, gave them honor, treated them with the respect that they deserve for making the huge sacrifices they have made, I think there is some potential for us to change things. It's not enough for us to just talk on these Zoom calls and then go away and not do anything, because Julian should have been out free a long time ago. The fact that he's sitting in a prison right now is an absolute injustice. The fact that his children, who are 4 and 5 now, have never met him outside the prison. I know Gabriel's, when he was a baby, saw him for a few times in the embassy, but they don't have any memory of seeing him outside that dungeon. And that's not what we do in a civilized society. And I just wanted to say, stay strong, and it's wonderful to be part of this conversation. And thanks for inviting me. And please do show your solidarity with Julian and attend the events that Vinny's going to tell you about, because that's where the difference, things change. And yeah, thanks for having me. And hopefully I'll catch up with Slago and Wendy offline to, we have some more other information and some initiatives here. I also wanted to just highlight that just not long ago, we've had 21 years since Guantanamo. So just the fact that the prisoners there, we're doing some exhibitions with their art here in Britain. And I wanted to flag that to you and to encourage your solidarity. So I'll stop there, and thank you so much for having me.
Well, thank you.
Oh, Deepa has a link. I'm sorry to interrupt, but it's on my phone, so it's hard for me. But Deepa, you have a link from that forum that you did, which was wonderful with Jeremy Corbyn. If you can put that in the chat, I highly recommend everybody. Thank you. Sorry to interrupt.
Thank you for that, Deepa. And I know you need to get some sleep. We appreciate, we still have 64 people with us. And it's great. Thank you for your patience.
Is Sluggo?
Yes, go ahead.
Next time, can we have Deepa on in the earlier part of our show, so it's not quite so late where she is?
Okay, of course, absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you, Deepa. Vinny, do you want to jump in? And
yeah, first and foremost, I want to thank Deepa for everything she does. She's an incredible human being, and sticking out this late, she was a perfect lead into what I want to say. May 3rd is World Press Freedom Day. We have a tendency here in the United States to look at things from our little tiny Amerocentric bubble. But we are facing a threat to journalism worldwide that is of an epic proportion. Every 4 days, a journalist is killed. Between 2016 and 2020, 1,600 journalists were killed for simply doing their job. So May 3rd is an incredibly important day. We are going to come together all across the globe, and particularly here in the United States. We'll have actions in DC and Chicago, in my own hometown of Los Angeles. We are having a die-in at the Grauman Chinese Theater at the center of the tourist industry in Southern California. We're going to have all the reporters who have been harassed by the US government. We consider ourselves an exemplar because of our Constitution and our guaranteed right to a free press. But all the guarantees in the world won't do anything when something as Byzantine as the 1917 Espionage Act, which is designed and has been modified since inception over 100 years ago to do nothing but go after journalists and whistleblowers. And if we do not stop this, as Deepa said, coming together as individuals to make our voices so loud that our elected officials cannot ignore us, We will lose that. It is very easy to lose your rights, almost impossible to get them back once they're gone. And so we're calling on everyone to find an action, whether it's calling your congressmen and senators and ask them, since you swore an oath to defend the Constitution against enemies both foreign and domestic, why are you not defending the Constitution, the most important element of that, the First Amendment, which calls for a freedom of the press? And so we call on everyone, please, if you're in Southern California, join us. And if you're not, even if it's getting out on the street and banging a pot, to call attention to the threat to freedom of the press around the globe. Now, although we are not focusing exclusively on Julian Assange, he was always in the back of our mind, but I think it's important to recognize the case is framed against Julian will set a precedent that we already see with the arrest of Evan Gershkovich, that any nation on the planet can extract a journalist to come and stand trial in their country, not for printing lies, not for printing slander, but for printing the truth. Nothing that Julian printed in his WikiLeaks release, the veracity has never been challenged. And it simply shows the crimes that our country commits in our names and our dollars. So I would ask you all, please do whatever you can on May 3rd to highlight the threat to freedom of the press. And I'll leave it at that. And thank you very much to Wendy and to you, Sluggo, for giving me this opportunity. And again, to my dear, dear friend, Deepa Driver.
Thank you, Deepa. Thank you, Vinny. Do you have a link? I see you say World Press Freedom Day. Is there a link to the activities that are scheduled for that day?
I'll get the link from our events page and put it in the chat right now.
Please do. Absolutely. Thank you so much. That was really good, Vinny. Thank you. Dr. Nancy, you've got your hand. Dr. Nancy Naparko, another one of our Southern Californians here. Go ahead.
Thanks. I just want to point out, Sluggo, that you're supposed to be, you committed to speak with our ADA SoCal Earth Day celebration this Saturday.
Right, but it's at I'm speaking to you at 6, and the event in LA in New York starts at 3. So I'm going to play the time zone. That'll be I'll be able to talk to you, and maybe I can get Marianne to come on with me. That'd be really cool.
Okay, well, you don't have to be in New York. You can be anywhere. To go on to our website, ADA SoCal, and we appreciate any kind of donation, but you don't have to. And we're going to have a handful of speakers about good stuff, and I'm going to talk about our plastic world. So I hope everyone tunes in.
Put the link for that event in the chat as well. You know, this call has been like a country. I mean, 3 hours ago, we were starting off in Wisconsin, and here we are still going here. Jeffrey, can you be very quick, please? Jeffrey, it's getting late, but we still have 60 people. I'll go as long as you guys want to. So anybody wants to speak, raise your hand, please. Jeffrey, go ahead if you'll be brief, please, and keep it focused on issues.
Yeah. Hey, Vinny, first off. Anyway, I wanted to ask for both Stephen and Derpa's contact so I could help them out in the Assange case. And then as for Anna, I was going to ask for a copy of her book, but I guess how to get one.
Jeffrey, if you'll put a snail mail address in the chat, I bet I can get Anna to send you a copy of the Old Testament.
To you?
I'll pay the postage. So
Jeffrey, save your chat, because her address is in there and she tells you to send some money to defray the expense of shipping, because it's a big book. So it's in the chat, save your chat, and it's in there.
How much money though?
I don't know, $10, $20, I don't know.
Yeah, $10 will do it. $10 will do it. So go ahead and send her a check, and that'd be great. Okay.